What is trust? How do you build trust between two people? And how do you foster an organizational culture built on trust? Welcome to Bryant Park. We had some recent snowfall this morning, and so I'm sitting here, and I hope you can see there's a little bit of snow behind me. It's also blue skies and sunny, so it's actually really, really nice out. This question is, I guess I repeat myself all the time. This is also a wonderful question. It's something that I certainly think about a lot in how I work, because so much of what I do is quite undefined, especially to begin with, and so it's only really possible to do work for me if there is a degree of trust established. Otherwise, there's no way that I can get hired to do anything if people don't trust me. So it's one of the most fundamental currencies for me in how I work. With anything that's undefined, I think it's absolutely essential. So what is it really? I don't know if I have a really good definition of what it is, but one way I think about it is that it's sort of it's a belief that I believe that, like, if I trust another person, I believe that they will do what they will say they will do. And if they trust me, it means that they trust that what I'm saying I will do is what I'll do. And it's not just in what you do or don't do. It's also why you're doing things. And so if trust is built on that belief that the person is honest and transparent about who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. So let's take the second part of the question. How is it built between people? I think a good first step is to reframe it and think maybe we don't only need to look at how it's built, because I think actually trust is one of the things that that can be so helpful for us, that I think we as humans we truly want to trust other people. So I think it's something that actually in many ways builds itself, except of course when we prevent trust from being built. So rather than only thinking how do we build it, what do I need to do to build trust, I think a much better place to start is to say, how do I avoid eroding trust? Because if I just can avoid doing things that erode trust and break trust, then the trust will grow by itself. So what are things that break trust? I think instead of me listing them, I think we all have experienced trust being broken. And so if you want to avoid breaking trust, just think about all the times where you've felt that someone else broke or violated trust, and have that as a starting point. It's a much better place to start than some long abstract list. I can say one of the things I do to accelerate trust is to try to be as open and as possible with everyone. I've talked previously about my annual reports, and I'll use that example again as just one way where I take the time to share who I am and how I'm thinking and what's going on in my life in a very open and genuine way every year. And I make it publicly available. And that, it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily something that's interesting to everyone, but I think it's, but I think for the people that are interested, and especially the people that are interested in building a trusted relationship with me, it's evidence, and it's something that's easy to look at, and in my experience makes it easier for other people to open up to me and and share themselves with me, which again accelerates the trust building. So I think it's stop worrying only about building it, avoid eroding it, and then think also, of course, of how you can accelerate trust. So the last part of the question is how to build a culture of trust. And I think it's one of the things where we first in the culture, I think, need to have an awareness around what it is, and to have a vocabulary for it, and also to have someone who model it. But I think we all do to some degree. I've seen terrible examples of cultures where the distrust in big and small ways, but often actually just in small ways from people in power, people in leadership positions, can make it impossible to really build a trust culture. And so I think if you want to build an organizational culture, you need to have the awareness, you need to have you need to have the language to describe it and talk about when it's there, when it's not there. But you also need to have very strong buy-in from people in power to be open to the kind of feedback where people say, what you did there negatively impacted the trust, so that they can become aware of it. Because it can be small things, it can feel like a small thing, but you can ask for things in a way that is built in a subtle way on a lack of trust. When you have people do timesheets, for example, it's often done in a way where it's based on this assumption that I, as a leader, don't trust that you truly want to be here and that you truly want to do this work. And so I'm going to make you do timesheets as a kind of control mechanism to see if you are at least showing up at your desk every day. And I think some leaders would say, oh, but that's completely harmless. We need to do that. But I think if we don't recognize that that's actually, it's not perfectly harmless. It might still be necessary, but it's not perfectly harmless, because it does build on an assumption of like lack of trust. And I think that's felt, especially when it becomes a system. And timesheets is just one example. So what we can do is we can if we need to do timesheets, we can still reframe it and say, the reason we do timesheets is not to make sure that you're here enough hours, but you can flip it around and say, no, I trust that you're going to do your work. You're doing timesheets so that you have data against me as the leader pushing you too hard. If you're working overtime all the time, you need to have those timesheets and data so that you can show me and tell me that I'm pushing you too hard. That's a way to reframe, for example, how timesheets can be done, where it's a weapon in the power balance that is actually helping the employee against the manager, rather than a control function for the manager against the employee. So, I mean, that's just one specific example that I spoke to someone about recently that I think is an interesting one. But it's like, to really build a culture, I think, of high trust is about constantly looking for all of those touch points. And you can only do that if you have the whole team, the whole company be aware of it and know how to spot it and think about and push for reframing it, and having leadership that is bought in and wanting to hear that feedback and wanting to over time let go of the practices that are less trustful. But I've seen it at work. I've seen it at work, for example, at SY Partners, where I used to work. That was a culture that over a long period of time had been built around this idea of trust. And it was everything from how expense policy and expense reports to timesheets to vacation policy. Everything was pushed very far in the direction of like, built on an assumption that fundamentally we trust that our employees always are trying their best to do the right thing, and we're giving them maximum power and responsibility to do that. And I really think that that was and is instrumental to how that company performs well. So I think it's critically important. As a side note, I started a new job yesterday. That's why I'm in Bryant Park, because the office is right here, and I'll talk about that another day. But it's one of the things that I am most focused on now that I'm stepping into a leadership role and leading a team, is how do I, as quickly as possible, make my team trust me so that they will be giving me the most critical feedback without hesitation. That's my very first objective. Without that, I will make mistakes and won't even know it. But if I can at least have them trust me enough that they will immediately tell me bluntly whenever I screw up, then I'm in a good place to start. So trust for me is one of the absolute core operating principles of what I do. And now that I'm freezing my ass off, shivering here, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye.